Assalamualaikum and good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nurul Armani binti Azmi. We are from Group 4. We will be presenting today about The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. But first and foremost, I will let my group members introduce themselves first.
Hello everyone, I'm Shun Lin from Group 4.
Hello, my name is Eva Cloudia and I'm from Group 4. My metric number is 203487.
Okay, hello and good morning everyone. My name is Nur Aqeelah binti Mazlan and my matrix number is 202116.
All right, thank you, everyone. So I will begin with the first slide. So we will start with the author's background. The author's name is Shirley Jackson. Shirley Jackson is an American writer who was born in San Francisco, California, and was later raised in Burlingame. Most of her writings would contain religious influences, such as the themes of mysticism, mental power, and witchcraft. This is because she had been raised with a grandmother who practiced Christian science, claiming that she can heal herself through the powers of prayers and more. She opposed her grandmother so much, even until death, that she told her daughter that the grandmother died due to Christian beliefs or something. So she went to Syracuse University, and over there she was involved in the campus literary magazine where she would publish her first story, Janice. So the lottery was actually the short story that gave Jackson her reputation as a writer of horror stories. She would later write and publish Haunting of Hill House, the novel which had won many awards such as National Book Award in 1960 and New York's Best Fiction in 1959. The lottery had also claimed an award in the O. Henry Prize stories. I will pass this to Eva now.
Okay, hello. So, the synopsis of the lottery. So, the story sets on the day of the 27th of June, where the summer weather is perfect to hold the annual lottery. The villagers of the small town gather on the square. In other towns, the lottery takes longer, but because of the small population of about 300 people in the town, the lottery usually takes only about 2 hours to complete. The children in the village, who have just finished school for the season, runs here and there merrily, collecting stones. Some put in their pockets and some makes a pile in one corner of the square. The men then gather, followed by the women. Next, the children unite and gather with their parents. Excuse me. Mr. Summers, who runs a coal business, is also the man who runs the lottery. He arrives at the square with a black box, and the postmaster, Mr. Graves, who is carrying a stool, follows suit. The black box that is used now is not the box that was used in the early days of the lottery. The original box was long lost even before Old Man Warner came into the world. Though there have been suggestions made by Mr. Summers to replace the black box, he never really seems to do it. The villagers, on the other hand, are reluctant to agree to the replacement of the black box. However, Mr. Summers managed to convince them to use slips of paper instead of the traditional wooden chips in the lottery. The slips of papers are mixed in the box by Mr. Summers. The night before, Mr. Graves and him made the papers, and then the box was locked up at Mr. Summers' whole company. Before the lottery can begin, Mr. Summers makes a list of all the families and households in the village that he is sworn in. In the earlier days, the official of the lottery must utter a chant, and a ritual salute must be done, but that part of the lottery has long been forgotten. Tessie Hutchinson, who is late, soon joins the crowd. She has she had forgotten that the lottery was today. She joins her husband Bill and her children in the front. The people good-humoredly jokes about Tessie's tardiness. After everyone is settled, Mr. Summers asks if anyone else is not present, and the crowd responds that Dunbar is not there. The, the one that will draw for Mr. Dunbar is his wife, Mrs. Dunbar, because her son is not old enough to take in her place. Then Mr. Summers asks whether the Watson boy will draw and receives a yes from him. Finally, Mr. Summers makes sure that Old Man Warner is present. After Mr. Summers reminds everyone about the rules of the lottery, he starts to call the head of each family to draw a slip of paper from the box and greets each of them as they come up to draw the paper. During this time, Mr. Adams tells Old Man Warner that the people in the North might give up the lottery. Old Man Warner ridicules the young people in the North, saying that they are a pack of crazy fools for wanting to give up the lottery. Mr. Adams adds that in other villages they had already given up the lottery. Old Man Warner continues to ridicule the youngsters. After Mr. Summers finishes calling names, all the people opens their slip of paper. In the speed of light, word gets out saying that Bill Hutchinson has got it. Tessie then argues that it was not fair because Bill was not given the time to select a paper. Mr. Summer continues by asking Bill if there are any other households in the Hutchinson family, and Bill answers no. His married daughter, Eva, draws with her husband's family. Tessie still protests that the lottery was not fair. With orders from Mr. Summers, Mr. Graves throws out the remaining slips of papers in the box to the ground and puts in 5 slips of papers for the Hutchinsons. Each of the family members draws one paper out when their names are called. When they open their paper, they find that Tessie has drawn the paper with the black dot on it. Mr. Summers ushers everyone to hurry. The villagers soon grab stones and moves in on Tessie, who is standing in a clearing in the middle of the crowd. Tessie says it is not fair, and a stone meets her in the head as a reply. The crowd begins to throw stones at her. Next are the themes for the lottery. First one is the danger of blindly following tradition. The villagers follow a tradition where they stone a person to death each year. This is a very odd ritual that exhibits the dangers of tradition when it is followed blindly without any research of its origin. Though at first the so-called lottery seems normal and harmless, later in the story, the uneasiness of the characters reveal bit by bit the disturbing truth about the lottery. It is also apparent that the villagers have no clue about the origins of the lottery, about why it is conducted or who started the ritual. But because it is a tradition that has been practiced since the earliest settlers, the villagers are not even the slightest disturbed to annually stone someone who is innocent to death. The fact that the lottery is a tradition gives them enough reason and justification to murder the winner of the lottery. The second theme is the randomness of persecution. Every year, the villagers persecute someone at random. The lottery is a ritual where every family and everyone in the village, including kids, has to draw a piece of paper from a wooden box. The randomness of the persecution occurs when the lucky individual has accidentally drawn the marked slip of paper, and with that he or she is automatically chosen to be the year's stoning victim. In the story, the villagers are quick to turn against Tessie Hutchinson because she has accidentally drawn the marked slip of paper. They do not care if she is a close friend, a neighbor, or a family member. She is the winner of the lottery and she must die. The randomness of persecution can still be seen around us until today. Certain traits that an individual have, such as their religion, appearance, race, and etc., becomes the mark of their persecution. The final theme is the importance of questioning tradition. The villagers strictly uphold the tradition of the lottery. However, none of them knows why the lottery is held or who started it. The fear of what will happen to the village and the villagers once they stop holding the lottery becomes a strong force for them to keep practicing the disturbing and brutal tradition. Plus, the unsolved questions and timelessness behind the old tradition gives it power over them. The villagers' unwillingness to question the tradition of the lottery exhibits the fear of change that is present inside every human being. Though the villagers still practice the ritual, most of the ritual's tradition has long been forgotten and even has been changed by the villagers to fit their circumstances. They are inconsistent in their adherence to the tradition, and it shows that tradition for the sake of tradition itself does not have meaning. The villagers started using paper slips over wooden chips because of the growing population. This points out that tradition should change hand in hand with the cultural context of the world. Analogically, the lottery has once made sense is already being questioned by most of the villagers. And for the point of view of the story, the lottery is in the third person objective point of view. Uh, a third person objective point of view is where the facts of a narrative are reported by a seemingly neutral, impersonal observer or recorder. So the lottery uses the third person pronouns such as he, she, and they. Readers are placed outside of the events that are happening in the story. The narrator is able to jump from one character to the other, and the readers are allowed to see events unfold and listen to conversations among the characters. However, the readers are not given access into the characters' minds and internal thoughts. They are only able to observe the events and listen to the conversations, like eavesdropping in the story. That is why the point of view is in the third person objective and not in the third person omniscient. And finally, the third person objective point of view also serves as a tool to keep the readers wondering about the mystery of the lottery and finds the shocking truth in the end of the story. If the point of view is an omniscient, the reveal at the end will not be as much surprising and disturbing. I will pass it on to the next presenter.
Alright, so I'll be presenting this part again. Moving on to plot structure. Thank you, Eva, by the way. So we will begin with the exposition. As we know that an exposition is essentially the part of the story where characters are introduced, setting of the story is set, and there's a hinting of the main conflict that will be made. And so in the lottery, the exposition begins with a very detailed imagery of a village town where many characters had gathered for a special and traditional event. So we know that the setting of the story is introduced 27 June, warm summer day, the site of a village town. The adults in the village would loiter and socialize politely among each other, while the children would gather stones and set them all at the section of the village town square. The hints that readers could receive from this story is that the stones that had been gathered will be used later. So it's kind of like a idea of the conflict is being made known. Let's move on to rising action. So rising action elaboration is made more towards the conflict. This starts with Mr. Summers, the conductor of the lottery, listing out names that will be representing each household to draw the box. Basically, he's explaining how the lottery will be conducted, and a character that stands out in this story is Tessie, as she arrived late to the event. So immediately she's kind of set apart from the people. Villagers would now draw from the lottery, and everyone waits for each other to select from the black box. So in the climax, as we've studied time and time again, climax is the highest point of action in the plot. So this is where the story is at its peak in terms of happenings and conflicts. Readers will find themselves at this point as the story reveals that Bill Hutchinson, which is Tessie's husband, had drawn the paper with the mark on it. which meant that he had essentially won the lottery. However, readers will also start to get the hint that the lottery is not as joyful as the story may imply it to be, as Tessie refuses to accept that Bill was given a fair attempt at picking out the paper. The following action starts when the story starts to move away from the climax and work its way towards the denouement, or the ending of the story. So this takes place in the lottery when Mr. Summers begins questioning Bill regarding the number of people in his household, and the second lottery starts. With each of Bill's family members, when each of Bill's family members pick out another piece of paper or wood, it is then revealed that Tessie was chosen. So the denouement, or the ending, is when Tessie is being surrounded by the villagers after they had managed to to collect the stones that were already grouped, and her last words were saying, "It's not fair," as a rock hits her head, and the story ends abruptly. So I'll be moving on to the plot techniques. The first plot technique that is used is symbolism. The one of the things that were considered as a symbol in this story is the black box. So the black box symbolizes the people's unwillingness to part with tradition. The black box, despite its oldness and worn out features, as well as missing lottery pieces of wood that had to be replaced with paper, kind of signifies how people just didn't want to move on. So the black box in this story is a symbol of people's unwillingness. This example can be seen in page 2, when Mr. Summers spoke frequently to the villagers about making a new black box, but no one liked to be upset. No one liked to upset even as much tradition as was represented by the black box. Okay. So the next plot technique used was suspense. Suspense is used in this story to hint at Tessie's death at the end of the story. From her introduction herself, Tessie is already alienated and set apart from the crowd as she arrives late to the event. Her outburst regarding the unfairness of the lottery also sets the tone for what is about to come. Tessie had said, "You didn't give him time enough to take any paper he wanted. I saw you, it wasn't fair." This is in page 2. Besides, the way that the villagers proceeded with the lottery in an almost precautious, they were being careful about it, also acts as a technique of suspense. This is especially evident in the scene when Mr. Summers said, "Some of you fellows want to give me a hand," and there was hesitation among the crowd. Next, we'll move on to imagery. So another technique applied by Jackson is the use of imagery, which sets the setting of the town in a way that very much contradicts the horror that will be taking place. In a way, this feels very much like she was kind of, what's the word, like slowing the process of you getting towards that suspense, sort of creating the suspense in a way. So throughout the story, Jackson continuously describes the settings and the characters with minute details, as seen in the first page itself, when the town was embraced with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely and the grass was richly green. This also used when Jackson had described the stones that were being collected, as seen when Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pocket full of stones, and the other boys soon followed his example, selecting the smoothest and roundest stones. Both of these examples were in page 1. Lastly, the plot technique used in this story is foreshadowing. So Jackson also uses the technique of foreshadowing when the story narrates that the children had started gathering stones before the lottery began, and the adults would generally keep their distance from the stone, alluding to its use towards the end. Once Tessie is revealed to be the unfortunate winner of the story. So this is evident in page 1 when the adults stood together away from the pile of the stones in the corner. All right, I will be passing this on to the next person. I think that's Fiona.
Yes, thank you, Armani. Okay, so I'll be presenting about settings. So the settings in the story is usually where the story take place and what's the society and so on. So I'll be starting with the place. So in the lottery, the name of the place was not told, so we couldn't decide where is it. So it's safe to say it's a small unnamed village. So the time is stated 27th of June and in an unknown year, but we know that the lottery takes place yearly, so it doesn't matter which year is it. So next will be nature. So the village is like a rural village with lots of greenery. So we can see in page 1 where the flowers were blossoming profusely and the grass was richly green. So they actually describe how the village looked like. So it looks like it's had a lot of flowers and they have a lot of grass. So it's actually quite a lot of greenery in the village. So next would be the culture. So what's the culture of that village is that they take part in a lottery event every year. So yeah, that's like their tradition. They do it every year. So next was the society. So what we know from the society is very family centered. As you see, like everyone in the family, unless you couldn't attend the lottery, like Mr. Dunbar, like he broke his leg, right? So he couldn't come for the lottery. But if you are healthy, you could attend. Everyone in the family should attend. So no matter how young you are or how old you are. So it's also a society that is very gender biased and conforms to tradition. I think we could see all this in like the gender bias is from Mr. Dunbar and Mrs. Dunbar's case, where the Dunbar's son, their son, who is still not of age yet, was preferred over the wife to draw the lottery. Yeah, so conform to tradition is how they keep doing the lottery every year. So next is the season. So season is on the summer. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny with the fresh warmth of full summer days. So it's at page 1. Yeah. So next. So the characters. So there are a lot of characters mentioned in the story, but I will only pick a few of the main characters from the story. So the first one will be Tessie Hutchinson. So Tessie Hutchinson was the wife of Bill Hutchinson. She's a humorous lady and quite well liked in a sense because the villagers still jokes with her when she comes late to the event. So but in the end we also notice that she's a selfish mother who is willing to sacrifice her children for a better chance. Yeah. So next is Bill Hutchinson, is Tessie's husband. So he's a man that abides to the rule of the draw, and also he's an uncompassionate husband who did not hesitate to expose his wife's draw. So like the moment his wife got the black dot or something, then then Bill just immediately went to her and like just let everyone see, oh look, my wife has the black dot, so stone her, something like that. Yeah. So then didn't really care about his wife in a sense. Okay. Next. So Mr. Summers. So in the story he was described as a joyful man who runs a coal business. So he's in charge of conducting the lottery yearly. So it seems like this Summers has a very high authority in the lottery lah. So he play a big part in the lottery. So next is Mrs. Dunbar. So she's also addressed as Janie in the story. So she's forced to draw in place of her husband who broke his leg, Mr. Dunbar. So she's also the representation of how gender biased the society is, as they prefer her younger son to draw instead of her, a grown lady, you know. So next is Old Man Warner. He's one of the oldest men, if not the oldest, in the village. So he's a very traditional man, and he is not willing to let go of the lottery tradition. So he even condemns those who actually stop holding lottery at other villages. Yeah. So yeah, next. So language style. Okay. So there's a few language style, like the language used by the author in the story. So first is long sentences. Long sentences are used to create like a solemn feel or to like describe something in detail for the audience or the reader. So firstly, so the author uses long sentence for these purposes. So we can see an example in like page 3 based on my source. So like he held it firmly by one corner as he turned and went hastily back to his place in the crowd, where he stood a little apart from his family, not looking down at his hand. So it kind of described this like hesitation about lottery back then, but in long sentences. So we know the details of the story. So next is short sentences. Short sentence, in the other hand, is to quicken the pace and to sometimes also to create suspense for the readers. So, like for instance, this is also an example in page 3. Mr. Summers consulted his list. Like that. It's just like very quick to let us know what happened. So next is slang. So if you read the short story, you notice that they have this a bit cowboyish west kind of slang. So like they say like anybody ain't here. So supposedly we will use language like anybody isn't here. Like when they ask if anyone is not around yet. But for them they use anybody ain't here. So it's a form of slang. So yeah. Okay, so I'll pass this time I think to Aqeelah now. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Fiona. Okay, I will be continuing the last part of the presentation, starting off with the values. So there were two values that I found in the story. The first one is respect. So the story mainly revolves around the townspeople respecting the lottery tradition. Although they don't really know the origins or why exactly the lottery was done, they kept up with the tradition as a way to respect the ones that came before them. The next one is a strong family bond. So the lottery acts as a way for to bond with each other. We can see that in the story that families get together and friends, people from all over the town get together and talk to each other before the lottery starts. This may be because that they know that one of them will die on that day. Okay, moving on to the message of the story. The first one is tradition should be respected only up to a certain extent. So if it crosses the line, we should know better to stop doing it. This brings us to the next message of we should not follow anything blindly without investigating the reasons and consequences first. So this does not only apply to the traditions in the story, but everything that we encounter in life should be investigated first before we follow it. Lastly, we should be able to accept the changes for the better. Changes can be scary, but it is the change that brings us forward. So the townspeople were too comfortable with the recurring tradition that they don't really care about stopping it. Hence, they would never be able to be free like the other towns. Last but not least is the social criticism. Okay, the most prominent social criticism seen in the story is the lack of awareness in the danger of a tradition. So the townspeople knew about the stoning, yet they are still excited to participate in it every year. This kind of implies that they simply don't really care or even acknowledge that they are even murdering someone, because everyone takes part in the stoning. Thus, no one is actually guilty. Last but not least is the unwillingness of being open to new changes. So we can see, especially in Old Man Warner, that despises the young people who stopped doing the lottery from other towns. He even went as far as calling them a pack of crazy fools. Okay, so that is all for our group. I hope everyone can understand, and thank you very much.
Thank you.